What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a new guide here. We got a new patch, new guide, Discipline Priest 10.1 action. Here we go. Been playing a lot of games in here, and I want to get this video out to you guys, and these are the things I'm going to go over in this video. I'm going to try to keep it as quick as possible. I'll try my best, but let's get right into it. Hope you guys enjoy. Like, subscribe if you like to try to content, more Discipline Priest content on the way, and let me know if there's anything else you want to say. So, talents, going in talents first. I'm going to give you two different specs here. One that you can use in threes, one you can give in twos, and I'll give you some alternatives where you can swap points. Okay, so this is my threes / solo shuffle build here. So this is kind of the base build here. This is gonna be very common among a lot of people. A few things that I do change here and there. I can change inspiration for double death. I could change double death into angelic bulwark if I feel like I'm gonna be taking damage. I can swap MD out into death now. I can kind of swap these around wherever I need them to be. Now, you don't always need MD, you don't always need, so inspiration is kind of hit or miss when you, depending on your crit levels. And yeah, so that's, and then you can also even swap out mind games. So like if you're really in a super defensive pickle, you can actually swap out all three of these points and go like here and be even more tanky. You have better disrepair. I think it's like Frosty K Evoker. This is a great thing. This is what I would probably do. Be able to swap all that just to give it a little more defensive, or you could even swap these into improve fade to utilize phase shift a little bit more. So that is it for the class tree there. When it comes to the spec tree, a few things here. So this is kind of definitely a cookie cutter build. This isn't like anything crazy. Just a few things to point out on this one. I am still running Schism. You can opt to run Shadow Covenant. I was running Shadow Covenant until like a few days ago, but I think I'm going to be swapping out of it for now. I don't know why it just feels so clunky. It does so much damage, but it just doesn't feel right. I don't know. I can't understand it. Can't explain it. If you do want to run Shadow Covenant, I would drop Bright Pupil. What I did was I dropped Bright Pupil and I dropped 1 point in Borrowed Time, and I went into Shadow Covenant and Embrace Shadow for the extended duration of it. Coming down to the bottom here. The reason I did shift from Harsh Discipline to Expiation is two reasons. One reason, the new tier. New tier is a buff to 12.5% buff that's with the 50% nerf to Purge of the Wicked. With a buff to Purge of the Wicked means a buff to Expiation. Expiation will do more damage. I tested on the PTR, so that's just how it works. And Harsh Discipline also lost value because the last season tier set was based on your penance damage or healing. You got a bigger shield. So the bigger penance you got, which it was affected by Harsh Discipline, the bigger shield you got, and you no longer have that, so that doesn't really matter as much anymore. So that's the reason I went to Expiation. And Expiation is kind of nice to be able to finish people off with death, I gotta say. Like, it really is game changer, especially if you're running double death. Being able to finish somebody off with that is just can really do some work on you know, 60 to 80k without Shadow Covenant hits, and you can close out games with especially in solo shuffle. So that's what I got for my threes and solo shuffle build. This is kind of like a cookie cutter build. This isn't something crazy offensive or any means. You could even drop Schism and go into like, and what do people do if they drop Schism? They probably go into Painful Punishment just to keep up their dots, or even maybe Abyssal Reverie. Yeah, they probably go into Abyssal Reverie or something. Anyway, let's go into the 2 spec. I will have links to these down below. 2 spec that I typically play is going to be different things that change here, as you saw. I don't have MD. I will still swap to MD. But if I do want to swap to MD, it's typically going to be dropping dropping double death, dropping move with grace, or dropping 1 in Twist of Fate, kind of depending on the situation and what I'm feeling like I could do. A lot of times it'd be just Twist of Fate. I mean, Twist of Fate is very good, but having a 30-second reduced cooldown is really powerful, and double death could just win you games, especially with Expiation. So that's 2 we call these specs. No, class side has not changed much. From the spec side, I dropped the 3 points in Aegis of Wrath, and I put them into Twilight Expiation and Harsh Discipline. I do not play Radiance in twos. This is a personal preference. You certainly can, especially with the buff in the tier set to Radiance. It might be more useful playing Radiance, but I personally don't enjoy playing Radiance. I don't feel like a complete need for it. And I've been able to kind of do the same thing with Flash Shield and the Atonement and shields and whatnot. And when it comes to offensive pressure, we have Painful Punishment is really nice when you're doing your burst rotation, and Expiation is ticking down your dot. And when you throw a penance in, it kind of brings it back up without having to waste a global on redoing your Purge of the Wicked. Shadow Covenant into Embrace the Shadows, of course, for the extra damage. I'm not playing Extended Rapture. Rapture loses its value a lot in twos, especially when you're not playing Aegis of Wrath, because the shields just don't do much, and you're going to have to rely on getting offensive pressure. Sometimes it's better to play offensive than defensive when dampening is getting higher, and it definitely loses its value on that. So this is a build to play a little bit more offensive. and make sure that if you are going to play without Aegis of Wrath, you need to do damage, because you're going to fall behind on really fast. So right off the bat, you're PIing, you know, going for your harsh discipline. So smiting, alternating from Shadow to Light School, smite, penance, or sorry, smite, Mind Blast, Solace, smite, Mind Blast, get your proc. And then I'll do my go, which is like Shadow Covenant into Purge of the Wicked, into Schism, into Purge of the Wicked, just to proc the shadow part of this. And then to Big Dark Penance, and then throw some Mind Blasts in there, throw Deaths in. Whenever you have Shadow Covenant in, and it's really good if you're especially if you're running Expiation, just to throw a Death in. It does a decent amount of damage, and Expiation procs, which is a decent amount of healing on top of that as well. So that is my 2 spec. When it comes to PvP talents next, I'll show this in regards to 3s. Oh, sorry, I forgot to also add something here before I can move on to that. Powered Solace. Okay, this is something I know I just forgot. Most people do not play Solace. I truly believe Solace is better if you press it. If you press it on cooldown, you're getting Atonement healing, you're getting damage, and most importantly, you can long live dampening games. If you are pressed in dampening, the mana regen may be just slightly lower than Shield Discipline in the course of a game when you're using your entire mana bar, but really clutch situations. I had a 9-minute game yesterday, 9-minute game, and probably 4 minutes of it was at 0 mana, but I kept myself up using Power, Life, procs on my Flash Heals, my Catharsis, and Power Solace. You can long live dampening games really well with Solace, and it actually does a decent amount of damage, which also is Atonement. So you're getting more healing, more damage, maybe a slight loss in mana regen, but in the long run, you may actually have more mana depending on how the game. Because if you go with Shield Discipline, especially in the solo shuffle, you're just fucked, man. You can't drink. There's nothing you can do. You just sit there and you wait to lose. But you still have a chance of winning with Solace. So that is the reason I did that. Okay, now going into the PvP talents. When it comes to 3s and solo shuffle, this is typically what I'm running. I will show you a few ones that I swap out. Okay, versus the ultimate radiance pretty much all the time, because yeah, we already know that by now. Inner Light and Shadow. In solo shuffle, I typically like to start off with Inner Shadow and see how the game is going before I switch to Inner Light, because sometimes that 10% bonus damage and Atonement will be the pressure that I need to establish victory. If I find the game going deeper into dampening, like no one's really doing anything, no one's taking damage, I will swap to Inner Light and just ride out the mana on that one. In 3s, I will almost always run Inner Light, just because mana is almost always an issue now, because the game is a little bit slower. And then in 2s, always start with Inner Shadow. Again, I may swap to Inner Light if I find the game going into dampening. So I kind of utilize a little bit of both there. But I think, you know, potentially establishing momentum is more important than saving mana, because you can end games prior to, especially in 2s and solo shuffle, which dampening just kicks up. And I mean, I rarely in solo shuffle. The game usually ends by that point, right? The third talent here, Phase Shift. I typically swap this between Phase Shift, Catharsis, Thought Steal, and Dark Arc, okay, depending on the situation. So Phase Shift is probably the go-to, especially into, you know, mages casting Poly on you, paladins going for Hodges and like blinds, and hunters coming at you for traps. That's kind of a more hit or miss too, because typically they're going to be stunning at a trap. And then also priest spheres, stuff like that. So those are the big ones: mages, priests, and paladins that I want Phase Shift in. If there's a situation where I don't find myself having to use this or getting good usage out of it, another option would be Catharsis. Catharsis is something I will use against Cleave, especially Caster Cleaves, specifically Boomkins, which are really popular right now, Ellie Shamans, and Shadow Priests. Those 3 classes will always keep you dotted, and I will purposely get dotted so that I can get Catharsis. It does give them a little more damage, but the Catharsis healing is really nice to have. Catharsis is effects by Atonement as well. I'll show you a game here really quick. Where's that 9-minute game? So this is a great example here. Look at this game. So this was a 9-minute game. This is what I was talking about before. 1.1 million damage off of Catharsis, which made my Atonement in a long-term game still able to do quite a lot, almost 5 million healing off of Atonement. And you can see it compared to Radiance and Flash Shield, that's even way more than that, almost catching up to my shields. So Catharsis can be really impactful versus, this was versus an Ellie Shaman, and I just did not dispel his Flame Shock on myself. I just left it there, and it's stacking up and giving me a lot of damage and a lot of healing at the same time. Upwards of a 73k hit, and which could even, you know, go to a 55k Catharsis hit. So that's our Catharsis heal, just really impactful. So Catharsis versus a lot of those cleave comps. And then finally, if I find no use out of either of these, which a lot of times the case in 2s, I will run Dark Arc, which is giving us more damage. Some people do opt to run Archangel. I do see a lot of people run Archangel. You can also do that as well. It's another option for you. You can even swap out Inner Light and Shadow for Archangel. But I play very offensively, and it is a little bit mana intensive, so it is nice to have Inner Light there. And then also, just to add in there, against Rogue Mage, I typically, this is what I will run. I'll run Thought Steal and Phase Shift instead of Inner Light and Shadow, to be able to steal the polys and then also avoid any like DBs or rings or whatever were polys, fears against, like, especially Rogue Mage and stuff like that. So mages, I'll typically run this. It's more like Rogue Mage, because Mage Warlock, for example, typically they're not going to go for poly. They're not pushing in. They're just sitting in the back casting, so I don't need Thought Steal in that regard. I'll probably stick with like the regular builds on that. But there's a PvP talents. I don't use the new Absolute Faith one. I don't think it has good usage really currently, or I haven't found a way to use it well. So that is it for all of our talents. When it comes to the gearing, I'm going to talk about first, so stats. The big stat that we're going for, I know I get this question all the time. Mastery definitely has a high value right now with dampening being, and just throughput needing to be so high. So I am running mostly dampening, or sorry, mostly dampening. I am mostly running a, hold on one second here. I am mostly running Mastery, but I do like to have a little bit of haste. So when it first and foremost, we got to talk about the tier set. If you do want to know how to get to this, you go to Rage, you change it to Shadowlands, and then go to Loot, and then change it to item sets. But anyway, for the tier set, we got to know which pieces we're going to be going for, because that's how we're going to gear. I think no-brainer is going to be, everyone's going to be running the gloves, which is verse main set into haste. I think there are going to be 2 other options that people are going to run. Potentially 3, I guess, if people want to run haste. But I think it's going to be, people are either going to run the legs for the main stat Mastery, or the shoulders, which I'm going to be running the shoulders for the haste Mastery. I think haste Mastery is probably your best benefit here. You have a decent amount of verse already, especially if you're not running the 4 set, which I don't plan on running the 4 set actually. At least at the moment, I will have to see when we test it, but it doesn't seem worth it. It makes you have a chance for Radiance to be instant cast, which it always is in PvP with your own Ultimate Radiance, and it's only a 25, because this is 50% nerf. It's a 25% less mana. That's not that crazy, especially for someone who doesn't play so Radiance reliant. And you could also go for the helm if you wanted even more crit or haste. Sorry, and then you could also run crit verse for more. I feel like I'm gonna be running the shoulders and the gloves, and some people may swap the shoulders out for the legs. So with that said in mind, the crafted pieces of gear. Okay, so you're gonna have 2 embellishments. Right now, I currently have the precog on my legs. I don't think this is a big deal, guys. I know a lot of people are like, "What piece do I put it on?" They're like freaking out. It's not a big deal. I just put on my legs because I replaced the old one, and I didn't put much thought into it, honestly. I know a lot of people did it on their gloves or their boots and made it haste, because there is no haste boots. But I have a feeling we're gonna have a decent amount of. I'm gonna have a comfortable amount of haste with the tier set that I'm gonna want a little bit more mastery. So I ended up going for mastery here. So I put it on my legs. For the second embellishment, I'm not 100% certain on this at this point, because I need to kind of test more of them, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to run the mastery embellishment. So I think you should eventually make 2 haste mastery embellishments and a precog. Run the precog when you need it. There are a lot of games where you don't need precog, and you definitely don't. The value of precog isn't as high with disc because you have 2 schools, but I've had some really clutch situations where precog comes in handy. It is nice to have, and I think ultimately we'll make both. For the other crafted piece, I'll probably just put it on my belt, I think, right? Because I'll probably put it on belt, but I don't really know. It's not. I don't think it's at the end of the world, guys. Don't overthink it, because it's just for stat allocation. Other than that, I think I'm going to be running. The one other crafted piece. Let me note this. There's one other crafted piece. This is kind of a markers thing. You don't have to do this, but something I do think I'm going to do is eventually make the engineering helm because engineering helm and the engineering wrist, they don't count as embellishments, but you could actually run those and they are pure 1 stat. So you could pure verse it, which is what I would do. I would just run an insane amount of verse. I would lose haste, absolutely, but I would have an insane amount of versatility, like probably be peaking around 40% at that point, which would be kind of wild to see. So I might do that for fun, and I'll experiment with it. I'll have to get back to y'all on that, because that's going to be a few weeks down the road, because you need a spark every time you craft a piece. And you can pretty much virtually craft a piece in every single slot to make it whatever stat you want. So keep that in mind. Always check out the crafter place to see what you can make, because you can just kind of make it whatever stats you'd like. Other than that, though, haste on the helm, mastery on the neck. I will eventually make a haste neck for 2s. I like to have a little bit more haste in 2s. The shoulders are going to be tier with haste mastery. The back piece with mastery. The chest piece, haste verse. The wrist, haste verse. For weapons, one hand from the conquest is going to be verse mastery. Offhand, haste verse from the bloody tokens converted with a trophy. Regular trinket, insignia for haste, mastery and haste rings, one of each. Mastery boots, mastery crafted on crafted piece, mastery crafted piece, and then the gloves are going to be haste verse from the tier set. So I think we're going to have a good balance of haste and mastery running in that regard. But we can always judge it. You know, you can run absolute full mastery if you just start crafting a ton of pieces if you like. If that's something you're interested in, go for it. But I think having mostly mastery but a little bit of haste is going to be my kind of sweet spot for myself. So that is all we got for on the gearing turns of things. Next thing I want to talk about is utilizing Atonement. Really, really important, guys, to be utilizing Atonement. I see so many people not doing it, so many disc priests not doing it, and it's such a minor thing that you could do. It's not even a big deal to do. Okay, here's a great example here. So in this game here, we did virtually the same amount of healing. He did a slightly more than me. Look at the healing breakdown, okay? So his Atonement was almost non-existent. He did probably, what he pressed, Purge of the Wicked like once. He pressed Purge of the Wicked once, and then he spread it once, okay? Don't be that guy. Don't be that Discipline Priest, okay? My Atonement healing was about 18%, so I'm doing the same amount, almost the same amount of healing in a more mana-efficient way, and in a way that is creating offensive pressure for my teammates to win. And fun fact, we won that game. Also, don't forget about this. This is also another reason why you need to keep your dots up. From darkness come shadows. Every time your dot, I feel like people forget about this. For every time your dots tick, it increases your next flash heal by up to 50%. That is really, really powerful. It gives you a massive flash heal. And if you're not keeping up your dots, it's as simple as this. You go into the fight, you press Purge of the Wicked, you press Penance. Now you have 3 dots. That's it. Okay? And then when your dot falls off, just throw another dot up. And then, you do your thing, you do your shielding, your healing. You don't have to put, doing all this healing, whatever. And then, again, throw in a Penance offensively. Spread it again. Now you have 6 out. I mean, obviously in a 3v3, you're not doing this, but you get the idea. That's as simple as it is. You don't need to go crazy with offensive. If you are playing Expiation, I do think you should at least throw in Mind Blast and random deaths. Even throwing in a random death is good, by the way. It does do, some damage, and you still get the Expiation proc off of it. It could be useful, especially if you're playing Shadow Covenant. Now, being able to Shadow Covenant and throw in just a random death. I almost always throw in a random death when I have Shadow Covenant up. But that's literally it. Do me a favor. Keep up your dots. All right? So that's just something I really wanted to make a point, because so many people do not press Atonement. And they're like, oh, what about in a long duration game? You're never going to get Atonement healing. You know what? Yes, you are. It doesn't have to be a lot. Like 12%. That's enough, man. That's literally. And this was a very minor casting game. This is a game where I'm pretty much just keeping up my dots the whole time. And you can do a lot of healing. It's so much more mana efficient, I promise. And it's more fun too, believe it or not. Doing damage is fun as just a priest. So, just do it. All right. Next on here, cooldowns. Just quick notes on the cooldowns here. Few things that I've learned that I've taken with me. Pain suppression, especially in Soul Shovel, get that shit on cooldown, man. Because the CDR from Protector of the Fall reduces shield, reduces the cooldown of it by 3 seconds every time you press shield. If you get your PS on cooldown, like when they first pop cooldowns, just throw one out there, even if it's 100% not necessary. Don't waste it, but if they are popping cooldowns, just use it, because then you can follow that up with Rapture when the next time you take damage. And during Rapture, how many shields are gonna get out? I got 1, 2, 3, 4. You can virtually get out what, like 10, 20, probably 10 to 12 of these if you're really spamming them. That is 36 seconds off of your next PS. That is going to give you the second one real quick. Or give you a recharge real quick on there. And it's obviously with the shields in between. The CDR is going to be pretty incredible on that. But typically I will be PSing in a stun. And just typically the first PS is going to be an offensive pin. Yes, I like to do a lot of offensive PS. So like the second they pop cooldowns, I pop PS even if they're at 100% health, so that I can continue playing offensive and generate momentum to keep the pressure going. The second one I'll typically hold for a certain moment, for a certain ability, or for a certain situation, like I'm gonna get stunned or something like that. Rapture, like I said, make sure that you are utilizing it, getting a good use of it. If you are not taking a lot of damage, really hold off. Rapture is your best cooldown that you have. It is your strongest cooldown. It can do the most ridiculous amount of healing and shielding and save your butt. So make sure that you are using saving Rapture for a good time. Also, make sure you try to using it before the damage comes in. Like if you see Incarn, for example, that's a great time to use a Rapture, because you know that there's going to be a lot of damage coming in. Something like maybe Avatar, maybe don't use it yet, see what's kind of going on, but the bigger cooldowns, definitely get that going. Power's Barrier, it definitely lost in value because it's no longer a short cooldown, but some niche situations where I will use it, I'll try to save Dome for, you know, obviously a Rogue Smoke Bomb, an AoE Leg Sweep on 2 of my partners from like a Monk, or if I know if it's a CC heavy comp like a Hunter, I'll try to, if I see Trap come off cooldown, I will just throw a Dome out there when I see him coming towards me, because I'm expecting to come for a trap anyway. Maybe I can pre-dome it. Also, another thing you can do versus Death Knights, I forgot to mention that with phase shift. You could phase shift the grip on Death Knights to not get blinded. But if I'm versing Death Knight at the beginning of the game, at this point, I focus more on phase shift, but what you can do is you can sit there and hold it here, or you don't have to hold it on there, but especially if you use like a mouse over macro. But if you know grip is coming, be ready to hold that barrier. You could grip in, you throw it where you throw it on top of the Death Knight, you could grip into it, and it's really, really nice to have, be able to do that. So, and then, you know, don't get too carried away with a good use of barrier, especially in solo shuffle. People will usually just run out of it anyway, you know. So those are our major cooldowns here, and then I'm going to talk about Fade. I guess on top of that, with phase shift, you can phase shift so many things, and I talked about it earlier, but that Death Knight grip is so powerful. The second that they grip you, you press phase shift, you avoid the blind. Boom, the whole go is fucked. Not the whole go, they can still they can still triple stun you into silence, and you're still going to be fucked. But you know, Shadow Fiend, make sure you are getting that off on cooldown. Do not use it first global though. You're going to waste your mana. Wait for like a little bit of mana to be used and then pop that, because that is really important on mana efficiency. And then Void Shift, try to always save it with Trinket if possible. Sometimes you can't help to because you're not getting CC'd, but try to save it for Trinket Swap, because if you get CC'd and you still have Swap, it just feels bad. They're gonna yell at you, "What do you swap?" You know, try to save it for Trinket Swap if possible. And then PI, I get that shit off real quick, man. You know, I have an add-on called Omni CD that I can track my teammates' cooldowns. Use that when they pop their cooldowns to be able to use that as well. To use on top of it. And the last thing here I want to talk about is positioning. Really, really important as this priest, especially with phase shift now. I'm finding positioning more important than ever. Excuse me. Play out of the game, okay? Find yourself a safe position. When you have a better field of view, you're keeping yourself out of the fight. You'll be able to get damage out without having to worry about kicks, and you're kind of giving yourself time to avoid CC. Whether it's Shadow or Death, you can. When I play in like this, man, I swear, like, it's so like your brain just can't process all these nameplates here, and then this guy's casting, and you're just on top of them. When you kind of have a bigger field of view, you're playing near a pillar, you can poke in and out. There's no reason to play in the open. The only time there would ever be a reason to play in the open is if you're getting trained by melee and you're playing with casters. That is the only time you need to be staying in the open. Otherwise, find a pillar to chill at. You know, be poking in and out, do your thing. You can always, you know, go behind the pillar, meld, drink. That's really nice to have as well. And just to be able to just kind of utilize that pillar so that you can do the things you need to do, you know, and without having to worry about all that stuff. And also, like I said, the biggest thing is really, because positioning can just be everything. Keep it, like, if your teammates run towards you, I say all the time, cast a caster, never run towards your healer. But sometimes they do it. When they run towards you, you run away. You run to the next pillar. Okay, if you grip your target, immediately try to get away from them if they're getting trained, you know. Give yourself a gap so that you can have a good field of view of what's going on. It makes for doing things other than healing a lot easier, being able to do damage and to avoid CC, especially avoid CC, and that will make a game. It'll be game breaker for you, go. I promise you, it'll really change your gameplay out. So I think that's it. That is all we got. I hope you guys enjoyed the Disc Priest guide, and I hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace out.